Welcome back to the show, and today, my friends, we're going to be breaking down 10 things that we learned about the upcoming single-player wizarding role-playing game Hogwarts Legacy from this week's State of Play presentation. We'll cover gameplay, spells, locations, enemies, and of course that all-important release date. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and to hit that notifications bell if you enjoyed the episode, as there'll be plenty more Hogwarts Legacy content appearing on the channel as we draw ever closer to launch. Now without any further ado, let's jump into our list of 10 new and exciting things that we learned about Hogwarts Legacy from the new gameplay reveal. Starting with the new info that we got on the story, because from what we know, the time in which Hogwarts Legacy is set is a particularly troubling one for the wizarding world. A fanatical, wizard-hating goblin named Ranrock has become aware of an ancient magic kept hidden from the vast majority of the magical community and is attempting to seize it for himself. To this end, he's begun stirring up a fully fledged rebellion among his race, and has even allied himself with a group of human wrong-uns led by the dark wizard Victor Rookwood. And to make matters worse, the player is thrust directly into the heart of this storm due in part to their link to the ancient magic that Ranrock seeks, and under the guidance of Professor Eliza Figg, who is quietly investigating the rumors of the mounting Goblin Rebellion. But beyond just giving us a better understanding of the story, the gameplay look also emphasized the idea that this is very much going to be your own untold wizarding journey, which is separate yet intrinsically linked to the magical world that we've all come to know and love. Hogwarts Legacy is after all set well over 100 years before the events of the original books, which means that your original character isn't going to be tied to any of the main characters from that series, but your story will still get to unfold in the famous locations and against the backdrop of the lore established in that universe to date. But getting back to specifics, you start the game as a 5th year who, for reasons unknown, has only just been accepted into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and must now race to catch up to his classmates. At the outset of your adventure, you'll have the opportunity to create your own witch or wizard using the character creator, and upon arriving at Hogwarts, you'll have the terrifyingly sentient sorting hat thrust upon your head, at which point it will steal your thoughts and determine which of the 4 houses you will spend the remainder of the game in: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or the best boys, Slytherin. Each of the great houses has its own unique common room hub area with its own aesthetics, mysteries, and NPCs to talk to. And don't be too worried about which house you pick, because I'm sure that you'll get to visit the other common rooms at some point with the aid of a polyjuice potion or some other kind of magical deceiver. And what with Hogwarts technically being a school, you will of course have to attend lessons. You'll cast spells in Charms class, you'll learn how to defend yourself in Defense Against the Dark Arts, you'll brew potions in the dungeons, and grow magical plants in herbology. And these lessons are sure to be a useful way to learn the basic skills and interact with classmates. And of course, there'll also be plenty of time to get to know them further and complete side quests in between classes when you'll be free to roam the castle. Which is useful because by all accounts it looks like there's going to be a veritable ocean of NPCs to interact with throughout the course of your adventure, and sprinkled among them will be some familiar faces who will be immediately recognizable to fans of the series. Now, as we've already mentioned, Hogwarts Legacy is set well before the mainline books, so you won't be running into any normal-ish humans who were alive at that time, like Harry, Ron, or Voldemort. However, what with it being a magical world, there's a whole bunch of characters who effectively cannot die and who were already ancient at the time that the Philosopher's Stone came out, and there's a decent chance that you're going to run into a whole lot of them. These include ghosts such as Nearly Headless Nick, Peeves and the Bloody Baron, sentient paintings, magical sorting hats, or even potentially people who have managed to extend their lives for hundreds of years using magical means, such as Nicholas Flamel. You'll even run into some of the ancestors from the main characters in the books, including the red-headed Weasleys. And there's even going to be some NPCs that you can befriend and take with you as companions on certain missions. But let's be honest, NPCs, while great and everything, aren't the reason why most people are excited for the release of Hogwarts Legacy. They're hyped because it's going to let them take the reins and explore the famous places that they've come to know and love from the books and movies. Alongside finding iconic locations and hidden chambers such as the Great Hall, the Astronomy Tower, the Library, and the Room of Requirement, we'll also get to investigate a ton of new and established locations that are found outside the school walls, such as the sprawling Forbidden Forest, the Black Lake, and more. And according to the devs, the world is going to experience dynamic seasons and weather conditions as the school year progresses. And that's going to add another layer of immersion to the game. You'll also need to make frequent trips to the local town of Hogsmeade, in which you'll buy ingredients that can't be found at Hogwarts and yet must be had in order to further your shenanigans. And these shenanigans will inevitably involve the use of spells and, let's face it, violence. So let's do a quick breakdown on what magic you'll be wielding throughout your adventure. because from what we've seen, there's set to be a ton of spells that'll provide interesting and varying approaches to combat. For example, here we can see the protagonist casting an enchantment that renders them invisible, which, combined with the Petrificus Totalis takedown, which essentially immobilizes an enemy, allows for a stealthier breed of combat compared to what will undoubtedly be my preferred method of charging in and making sparks fly. Fans of this more upfront approach will be able to drag enemies towards them using Accio and throw them about like a filthy ragdoll. You can also use this spell to drag items towards you and cast them at enemies. Beyond that, you'll also be able to stun and disarm opponents, counterattack, and use varieties of spell combinations in order to hurt opponents in a range of wholesome magical ways. Prior to combat, you'll also need to brew up potions and craft items that'll give you an edge in a duel, whether it be a potion to increase your attack power or weaponize plants to mob and stun enemies. And of course, I'm sure that's just scratching the surface. There's going to be a ton of spells that you can learn by attending classes, exploring the castle, and interacting with NPCs that'll help you take on a range of enemies with specific strengths and weaknesses. But regardless, you're going to be able to tailor the challenge of these combat encounters via the inbuilt difficulty settings, because Elden Ring this is not. And as you progress through the game to keep you on a par with enemies, you're also going to be able to loot, craft, and buy new magical gear and clothes that can increase your combat capabilities and change your aesthetic. But of course, not every challenge in Hogwarts Legacy can be solved with a judicial application of violence. There's also going to be plenty of environmental puzzles spread throughout the game, which will hopefully test players' problem-solving skills in different ways. Furthermore, continuing the open world RPG theme, Hogwarts Legacy is set to play host to a fully fledged skill tree, in which you can level up your character and gain access to new skills and abilities that'll help further your playstyle. But moving on to how you get around, everybody who's anybody knows that students aren't allowed to apparate or teleport on school grounds. But that doesn't mean that you'll just be using your feet to hoof it around in Hogwarts Legacy. Thankfully, the devs have implemented flying as a key traversal mechanic in the game, and alongside making things faster and more fluid in terms of gameplay flow, that decision is also going to allow for a good degree of verticality when it comes to level design. Obviously, you'll have the option of jumping on a broomstick, but this won't be your only choice when it comes to soaring through the skies. You'll also be able to hop on the back of a hippogriff and likely other magical creatures once you've gone through the process of befriending them. And speaking of magical creatures, it looks like there's going to be a whole lot of them. On the friendly side, you'll have creatures like thestrals, hippogriffs, and centaurs, but for each and every one of these, you're also going to have a troll, a dragon, a goblin, and whatever the ever-loving hell this Cthulhu-esque dog creature is. The good news is that at least some of these beasties are tameable, which brings me to my next point. We also found out that the Room of Requirement, which features heavily in both the books and movies and essentially has the ability to sense what a person needs and immediately provide it, serves as the secret base of operations for the player. Here you'll be able to craft potions, upgrade gear, and through the use of impossible vivariums, maintain a menagerie of magical creatures. And finally, we were given an updated release window for the game, which is now set to drop in the holiday season later this year on PS5, PS4, PC, Switch, and the Xbox Series S, X, and One. Though I will say that the lack of a specific release date leaves me a little bit concerned that the launch could slip to early 2023 if something goes awry in the later stages of development. And that is it for today's video. Let me know what you thought about the extended gameplay reveal in the comments section below, and be sure to keep it here for all the biggest news, reviews, and reactions from across the video gaming industry.